I will never forgive my boyfriend's betrayal when he decided to start a relationship with my ex-best friend, although I begged him to return, but he blacklisted me and did not answer my calls. I have anxiety and am autistic. This manifests in a lot of extreme responses to things, which mirrors my emotional state but also my physiological jitteriness and bouts of hyperactivity when at rest for too long. I spend a lot of my time trying to suppress and modulate these extremes before they lead me into burnout, even aimless walks round the block to tire myself out before bed. Ironically, my efforts to suppress have led people acquainted with me online to believe that I'm a kind of pseudo-philosopher bro type who's incredibly dispassionate, analytical, nuanced and non-judgmental. Yet friends know I'm the opposite. I'm a raging ball of stress and worry LF the time with a proclivity towards extreme thoughts and reactions. Clinically speaking, I've been moderate severe GAD on average for the last 12 years. At this point I'm both defensive of my diagnosis as any other health condition and also incredibly frustrated about the impact it has on myself and others, and this is important. Sometimes my friends, family or partner and I will have an argument. I hate conflict, because of course, being anxious, it activates my fight or flight response. But people underestimate the intensity of this. It is like a roller coaster. I would rather let people I care about just have their way than have to risk conflict with them, because it isn't really ever just an argument. It is a fight against my nervous system while somebody is mad at me and likely to do something bad, most likely abandonment, criticizing and judging me. Or maybe violence or calling in an authority figure who has power to hurt and control me. I get DSY regulated. In the most intense cases I will have a meltdown which can lead me to want to scream, smack at random objects, and eventually burn out, at which point I have gone into shock and lost my voice, but generally I get rejection sensitivity overwhelming me. But that is not quite true. It's more like my personality is split. There is a part of me which wants to be actively stomped all over and another which makes me want to do some stomping of my own. And there is a part of me which wants affirmation, validation and reassurance when I get, and a part which despises that emotional and childish weakness. A part which wants the horrible feelings inside to go away and part which wishes they'd last forever since I deserve it. Meanwhile the diplomat, peacekeeper and nuance finder in me is trying to mediate between these two in a tug of war which makes me feel like I want to explode. To complicate this further, I wonder what the fact that I even have an overactive nervous system means or represents, morally speaking. After I have had this argument, I will often check to see if my response or desire was valid or irrational, likely pathological, selfish, manipulative, passive-aggressive, etc. In other words, is my behavior and by extension am I being toxic? Given my special interest in psychology, I use diagnostic features for this of e.g. personality disorders, or academic and pop psychology articles, but I also do this by e.g. Googling the problem and then anxiously scanning through message boards. I've noticed that there are a lot of people who feel that it is shitty to have a panic attack as a response to conflict. That people who react like this need to work on themselves, and so I am inclined to believe that I am morally inferior as a person for being anxious in response to conflict. But it's hard for me to accept that anxiety and panic attacks and generally speaking my feelings in conflict and argument in relationships are 10,000% my fault problem responsibility. I have been in therapy on-off for years to try to work on emotional coping mechanisms. So it isn't like I take no steps to managing my mental health. But I have to admit guys, the fact that I have an overactive CNS and inflamed amygdala etc. makes me a bad person, friend, partner is a hard one to swallow. As is the follow-up thoughts, that because of this, maybe I deserve to be lonely, maybe I should be stripped of my rights, maybe I should be locked up in a care home or just separated from normal healthy people. When my last breakup happened 10 years ago, I confessed that I felt like I'd abused her and needed to be referred to the DV rehab programs ASAP. But my doctor just upped my medication and referred me back onto the outpatient programs, refusing to believe that my treatment constituted abuse. It seems like society does not take my notion that the fact that my behavior causes others pain sometimes is indicative that there is something terribly and unforgivably wrong with me seriously. I hate being emotionally weak. There are so many stories of people getting sick of this shit when I Google. I wish I could be utterly unfazed by what people say except when my reaction is the correct one. And yet, there is a selfish part of me which is sick of having to stay single and socially isolated and possibly compel myself to act to lose my suffrage or power of attorney etc. So as to restore justice because of a medical condition which I've probably got to live with for the rest of my life. Why do I not deserve rights because of this? Should people with cancer lose the right to vote and be locked up, too? But I guess the difference is that cancer doesn't hurt loved ones, in such a way that they associate the person with cancer with suffering. The same way that an anxious reaction might. They both elicit distress for loved ones, but it's usually compassion or pity for suffering. Whereas mental health can lead people to change in ways which make relationships intolerable and force them to draw boundaries. That is to say, cancer does not make people toxic, by and large. Untreated mental health issues do. Honestly, it seems to me the only way to not be a bad partner and generally relational parasite is a magical treatment to never experience a distress response in conflict again because it creates ego that gets in the way of allowing others to be heard. But this seems physiologically impossible without removing or fixing my hypersensitive adrenals and amygdala. I can regulate it to a more moderate degree via e.g. CBT, but I cannot eliminate it. What does it say about me that I cannot do this while others can? My distress intolerance has had empirical effects which make it morally more flawed and inferior than others, so I have to treat it as more pathological and less tolerable. It's scary to not know how to fix an aspect of yourself permanently and what that says about you, short of lobotomy. My therapists always say I am being too hard on myself, but I disagree. I try to convince them that they only hear my side of the story. And sometimes I will spend entire or multiple sessions just trying to justify another person's behavior or reaction to me through their life story. To the extent that the therapists have now treated this as a pathology which has me avoiding talking about how I feel. A therapist will never see me cry, Mostly they just see me being an annoying shit who rambles and contextualizes everyone's life story to present it as the most objective case for judgment tbh. Just to be clear, this is not what my friends or partner said, this is my interpretation of my behavior after an argument. I try to hide the extent of my reaction to conflict from friends because it is manipulative. It is a hard pill to swallow that everything that protects me is a manipulation, and I would be a better person to just accept any criticism or demand at face value I'm NGL. As a final thought, it is hard for me to tell to what extent this thought is legitimate or moral scrupulosity. Some friends and professionals think that I exhibit OCD symptoms, which is of course comorbid with anxiety and autism, given our typically higher trait cognitive rigidity and neuroticism. I know about thought-action fusion. I score into the 100s minus 110s on intolerance of uncertainty questionnaires. WHCIH is above threshold. I have done the Dugas protocol and ERP. Have multiple self-help books. The thing is, none of this reading eliminates it, and it's the existence of the problem which makes me bad. I want to never hurt anyone again, and I hate that I cannot do this. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this. So, I'm not technically a step-parent, as my partner and I aren't married, but I am raising a child with her. We've been together since last summer and she has a child who is now 3. I love them both, but it's so difficult and I'm not really enjoying it, or happy. Her son is such a sweet little dude, he's so smart and empathetic, but he is pretty wild. Even his daycare teachers and grandparents comment on how wild he is. That said, he's not a bad kid, and I hesitate to use that word because I don't think kids are bad. Or is it bad when kids act out in ways we collectively deem as bad? Because kids are learning how to be a person and express themselves and act and be rational. But I've just seen so many nightmare situations in social media, and I think, thank God we don't have to deal with that. But it's really hard, and I'm not sure I'm cut out for it. It seems like he requires constant attention and affection, and it's just constant from the moment he wakes up until he goes to bed. I understand he's still developing and learning, and it will take a while for him to develop independence and self-confidence, but I feel like I don't have the bandwidth for it. I wish I did. I wish things were different. It's awful because my partner will often express feelings of regret about being a parent, and it's like no one wants this child. She's stressed to the gills and not having a good time either, and the stress of the situation really drives a wedge between us. And she'll often get upset and act out, like raising her voice when she's been pushed past her limit, and she's quick to own up to her behavior and apologize to him. But if I do it, it becomes a huge ordeal. Like this morning, I made breakfast for us and he wanted more, so I was making him more food, and he's just talking my head off about how he wants his food pancakes with butter and syrup, and I'm in the process of making it for him, and he just keeps asking for it despite me telling him that's what I'm doing. Then he realizes I'm making the pancake and asks for syrup, and I'm saying, I know, that's what I'm doing. But it doesn't register with him, and he's said it like 15 times, and I finally say, yes, I'm putting syrup on it. But I'm a little peeved, and then my partner says, you're short-tempered this morning, which doesn't help, and I just feel shut down. And of course I know if I repeat back to him what he says he'll feel acknowledged, but it's not always easy to do. especially in the moment, when I'm stressed out, sleep deprived and maxed. New player's character completely trivializes mine and I'm not sure how to deal. The campaign we are currently playing has been ongoing almost every week for over a year now, and it's been wonderful. Great DM. Great players, great characters. We are a wacky team comprised of my changeling knowledge domain cleric, a tiefling fiend warlock, a high elf shadow sorcerer, and a kobold fighter. I recently convinced my partner to join the campaign and he received a warm welcome. I helped him build a character that's both strong and easy for him to roleplay as. It's an Aasimar Oath of Redemption paladin, and the DM was kind enough to gift him some cool starting equipment, including splint armor and a Morningstar of Warning. I feel very silly for this, but I grew jealous of my partner's character. I guided him all the way through the character creation. We looked up everything together so he would have an easier time choosing, and the end result was a character that makes mine completely obsolete by simply being near the party. This is my first ever campaign, so when we started out a year ago, I didn't fully understand how my stats and proficiencies would come into play. I rolled my stats, distributed my racial bonuses poorly, and often took feats that made sense for my character instead of much-needed ASIs. It has bothered me for a while that I am struggling to keep up with how strong my cleric should be at this point, and it got to a point where it impedes both fun and functionality. My healing is limited by spell slots, while his Aasimar has us covered with class actions. I took the alert feat cause it made sense for my character, but what good is it if we have a paladin with an, of warning, weapon? I have the highest wisdom in the party, but almost everyone has insight proficiency, some of them higher than mine due to luckstones. I'm taking a few levels in Druid for versatility reasons, but what's the point in that when my damage is possibly the most negligible one on the whole team? Especially now that we have a paladin as well as a fighter. I already lost access to the guaranteed divine intervention I would get at level 20. So it's not like I traded my few unique things for anything worthwhile. Even on a roleplay level, an aspect of my cleric is that she is the dedicated party medic with a criminal background, and I feel like I bring absolutely nothing to the table anymore. I am not sure my cleric is good at anything that another PC isn't equally as good, or better at than her. No. Wait, there is one thing. Medicine proficiency, which came into play exactly twice in the last year. I floated the idea of respecting my character to the DM, reasoning that I would build her completely differently knowing what I do now, but it was always met with a no. I can respect that. I can just be more mindful where equipment I get and plan ASIs feats better in the future. I could just retire my current character, but I have grown really attached to her and would like to see her story properly finished in some way, even if it ends up being death later down the line. It feels stupid to be insecure about this. So I'm not even sure I'll bring this up to the DM. I can suck it up and play as I do. I just needed to vent a little to cope easier. Advice is welcome, but I'm not sure there is anything to really do here. Feeling trapped. Don't know what to do. I'm so tired of feeling so much all the time. I just need to air everything out and get insights from unbiased sources. I'm also planning an APPT with a therapist. I have been with my husband since August last year, and married since April this year. Things were rushed. I was manipulated and coerced, and we also have a 3-month-old child. I had plans to be child-free and maybe not marry, until I disrupted my life. I threw away all my freedoms because I felt my clock ticking and a twinge of loneliness. It started with him asking me to a double date an hour away by his place. It was a terrible excuse for a date. We got bar food and watched a movie. Every day I feel shame for accepting that. There was really no courting, no romance, and no grand gestures, but at the same time intense love bombing. He told his mom the day after we met I was the one. At first, my family loved him. He was so charismatic and friendly. They thought he was a great guy, but he was putting on a show the whole time. In private I'd have to beg for affection, and for him to say, "I love you." But at the same time he'd always say, "When are we getting married?" I was ready to be no one's wife, but he treated it very nonchalantly. The biggest red flag was the fact that he refused to use condoms, which I repeatedly told him I was uncomfortable with and begged him to use them. He had a comeback for everything. He showed me recent STD tests and all. I felt silly for being concerned. Until I found out I was pregnant. Of course he wanted me to abort. And I never wanted kids, so you think I would too, but I couldn't. I felt like, how far am I going to let this man dictate my body? This was admittedly short-sighted, but I felt it was a way of finally having some agency. Plus I was already attached, and thought best before 30. From start up until I gave birth, I feel like I wasn't in my right mind, like I couldn't accurately perceive what was happening. In the early dating phase, I feel like I was under the haze of love bombing and praise from family, friends, and strangers saying how cute we were. And when I was pregnant I felt under a haze of pregnancy hormones. I did not feel like myself. There were still constant issues and fighting throughout though, so I wasn't completely blind. When I was pregnant, he would hate helping me and constantly told me I'm lazy and he felt like a slave errand boy. He always wanted to drag me out somewhere even though I was uncomfortable and exhausted. It was a miserable time. And during L&D, he complained the whole time to my family about how tired and bored he was. That was the turning point for them. And he did not stay with me overnight. The chairs were uncomfortable. It's only now, at postpartum, where I feel I can accurately reflect on all the crap I put up with and wondering how I got here. There's so many more little things that I just don't feel like getting into. Like my mill constantly overstepping my boundaries. She actually encouraged me to keep baby even though her son told her he didn't want it. Now we are separated but in contact and see each other frequently. I am doing basically all the childcare and I'm so tired and angry. I love my precious sweet potato. I just wish things were very different. I have a lot of animosity and resentment towards my husband. While I'm taking care of baby he's out doing activities, even when we were together. I'm so sad. I want a divorce but don't know if it makes sense financially right now and I still need to finish my education. I also need to gain independence from my family, who are crossing boundaries with baby. Furthering my education seems the only way out but I don't want to overdo it with a newborn and full-time job.